With real estate investors and speculators being blamed as one of the major sources of the skyrocketing home prices here in Canada, there are strong rumors that new rule changes and restrictions are coming to the financing process of investment properties. But what are these potential rule changes? When would they be implemented? And what sort of an impact would they have? To find out all that and more, stay tuned because it's coming at you right after this. What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here from the Dunbar Real Estate Group and RE/MAX Treeline Realty based out of the Surrey-Langley areas. And in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the potential rule changes coming to financing an investment property. If this is your first time on my channel, I make weekly real estate videos related to the BC and Canadian real estate market, as well as showcase community tours across the Lower Mainland. So if that's something you're interested in seeing more of, I suggest you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you're notified whenever I put out a new video. And before we get into it, I'll ask that you do one thing for me, and that's to hit that like button so the algorithm will push this video out to more individuals just like yourself who want to learn more about real estate. But diving right into it, there's been recent chatter in the mortgage space that the people in charge of making Canada's finance policies are suggesting to make some changes to the way investor financing works for investment properties. Purchases of secondary homes in the last 10 years is up from 15 to close to 25%. And because of this, there's been a lot of buzz around real estate speculators and investors. This was a hot topic prior to the Canadian government announcing their budget for 2022 on April 7th, but after nothing was mentioned about implementing these changes, it kind of died off a bit. However, in the last couple of days, it's been brought up again in quite a serious manner. So what exactly are these potential changes? Change number one would be increasing the minimum down payment on an investment property from 20 to 35%. And change number two would be banning the use of home equity line of credits, also known as HELOCs, as a source of down payment. And this would come in addition to borrowed or gifted funds. Essentially, they're trying to make buying property more difficult for investors and speculators and easier for those who actually want to live in the property. And this is completely understandable, as the affordability crisis has only continued to worsen over the past couple of years. Recently, the Canadian government did implement two new changes that they're hoping is going to make an impact. This was part of the federal budget for 2022 and included the following: an anti-flipping tax for properties sold less than 12 months after purchasing. However, there are some specific exceptions to this, such as death, childbirth, disability, job change, or divorce. This will apply to all residential properties sold after January 1st, 2023. And the other major change was a 2-year ban on foreign buyers. Many Canadians have been asking for this for a long time. However, I personally don't think it's going to have much of an impact. From my experience, these foreign buyers are not the ones buying the residential properties that families are trying to purchase. Typically, from my experience, they're looking in the luxury markets and the pre-sale markets. So I personally don't think this is going to have much of an impact, if at all, but at least it's going to make some Canadians happy. But getting back to the future potential rule changes, there was an article put out on March 23rd by stories.com. The article outlined the potential changes to mortgage rules for real estate investors, noting the concerns of using a HELOC as a down payment due to the fact that it's essentially 100% financing, and the fact that down payment requirements could increase to up to 35%. However, a more conservative approach in the 25 to 30% range could also be in the cards. It was made very apparent that if these changes were implemented, there would be a massive impact in the market. Something to note is that one of the big banks during the pandemic actually did try to implement a similar policy. They stipulated that borrowed funds, including HELOCs and mortgage refinancing, could not be used in order to finance a rental property. However, when the other large consumer lenders didn't follow suit, they had to abandon ship. The article also highlights some statements from Mortgage Professionals of Canada President and CEO Paul Taylor. And in his opinion, he's not so sure the Canadian government actually wants to target Canadian investors. New Zealand actually recently implemented a 40% minimum down payment for investment properties. However, Taylor doesn't think that Canada will follow suit. He mentions the fact that they don't want to penalize mom and pop investors, and the fact that the people who own these secondary homes are really the ones creating the rental stock. And without these properties, it would really put a squeeze on renters. And in relation to what he mentioned, if these policies were put in place, it really would only impact those mom and pop investors, because the large corporations and the people with deep pockets wouldn't really be affected, at least not to the same extent. Additionally, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, or OFSI for short, did confirm that while even though nothing is in writing yet, HELOCs have been a major point of focus. He mentioned they've been monitoring the evolution of HELOCs for some time now. Earlier this year, he cited HELOC loan products and mortgage underwriting practices and procedures as two areas that the OSFI will focus on. So as I've mentioned before, the government is typically reactive rather than proactive when implementing policy. And in general, by the time they've actually implemented anything to try and make changes to the market and cool it down, those changes have already taken place. And that's what's currently going on in our market. It's already started to cool down with the increase in interest rates and increased level of inventory. However, However, this isn't always apparent to the public, and when they see the government making these changes followed by the cooling of the real estate market, they correlate the two and actually believe the government was responsible for those changes. And obviously the government's more than happy to take credit. However, when looking at previous attempts of the government to try and cool the housing market, the most notable changes have been psychological shifts from buyers, rather than the financial impact of the restrictions themselves. So while stricter down payment and borrowing rules could knock off 15 to 20% of investors, it's likely that about 50% would be scared out. A clear example of this was the effects of the foreign buyers tax when it was originally implemented in 2016 and 2017 in BC and Ontario. So the real ongoing battle in our real estate market is how to make housing more affordable for first-time buyers without significantly impacting current homeowners. I personally don't believe that the government actually wants to see the erosion of property values or try to target those who are relying on their home for a retirement saving. Currently, over 75% of Canadians do own their homes, and there are a large majority of these individuals who are relying on the equity in their homes for retirement funds. But if you don't agree with me there, I think we can at least both agree that the government does want to keep home prices high because of the fact the higher the home prices are, the more taxes they get. It's almost like they have a vested interest in the real estate market. And if you want to hear a little bit more about that, I made a previous video on the topic and you can find that right up here. So now that we've discussed what these potential rule changes are, let's talk about what sort of an impact they may have on the market. Number one is the fact that it's likely to lead to less investors in the market overall. Obviously, there's pros and cons to this, but I think this would probably be one of the most obvious changes. Additionally, this would force more investors into partnership. Whether that's friends or family, most individuals would no longer be able to purchase an investment property on their own. If they previously had a 20% down payment that they could have used, it's going to be far more difficult for them to come up with 25, 30, or even 35%. So for this reason, I think there'll be more families, friends, and businesses coming together to make those purchases. Another change would be an increase in the cash flow of investors. And this is simply just based on the increased size of the down payment, which would lead to a smaller mortgage. Next, I do believe this would cause some sort of a plateau or even a small correction. As we've seen from the data, about 25% of the current buyers in the market right now are investors. And with a decent portion of them knocked out of the market, this would in turn lower demand. However, overall, I don't think this plateau or correction would be long-lived. I also think we'd have a decrease in the level of speculation, and more specifically in the pre-sale and new construction market. In recent times, I've seen more people than ever look to purchase a pre-sale property with no intention of completing on it. And while I don't have any hard data on this, the conversations I'm having and the number of assignments in the market right now are what leads me to believe this. And this is typical of a hot market. And in addition to the recent rules of GST being charged on all assignment sales, I think this would majorly decrease the demand in the pre-sale market. Next, I think this would lead to an increase in the level of competition in the rental market, which in turn would increase rent prices. And this is simply just supply and demand. If we have less people able to purchase rental properties, this means there's less rental properties for renters, which in turn means more competition, which is going to drive up the prices. Another trend I think we'd start to see is an increase in B and private financing. This would lead to increased leverage and more risk for investors, and could wind up bad for those who are inexperienced. And with that, I just want to cover what one of my major concerns is. And that's the fact that there's several people right now who have already bought pre-sale properties but don't have the ability to close on them if they're going to have to use a 35% down payment, or if they can't use a HELOC. Now, hopefully the government would think about this and make an exception for those who purchased a pre-sale prior to the implementation of these rules. But looking into history, that's not always something that they do. Now, regardless of whether the government does implement these rule changes or not, I think we can all agree that buying a rental property is only going to get harder moving into the future. So if it is something you are considering, you should probably start thinking about it sooner than later. And just before I conclude this video, I want to leave you with a couple of my suggestions. Personally, I'm not a big fan of making major changes all at once. More specifically, changing the minimum down payment on an investment property from 20% to 35% all at once. I personally believe they should implement 5% increases gradually. In doing so, this would create more of a soft landing than an abrupt stop. I think they should wait to see how the current interest rate increases are going to impact the market, because we're already starting to see a cooling. And if we do continue to see interest rate increases as expected, and the government chooses to throw this at it at the same time, it can only lead to bad things. Again, everything should be introduced slowly and conservatively rather than aggressively and all at once. And that's about going to do it for my video today, but if you did get any value from this, I'll ask that you hit that thumbs up button. And if you're interested in seeing more real estate videos just like this one, I suggest you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you're notified whenever I put out a new video. I'd also love to hear from you, so leave me a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are, if you have any concerns, if you agree with these changes, and if you think they should be implemented. And lastly, if you're looking to purchase a rental property before any more of these rule changes are introduced, or you're just looking to buy or sell in Surrey, Langley, or the rest of the Fraser Valley, you can scroll down and hit the first link to book a call with me at your earliest convenience. Thanks so much for watching. watching, and we'll see you in the next video.